At my wedding, my fiancé's ex-girlfriend played intimate photos of them on a big screen. The guests were shocked, and I confronted her angrily. But he said, "Vivian is just being immature. Do you really need to be so mad?" I couldn't believe it. His ex ruined my wedding, and I couldn't even be angry? With his tolerance, his ex-girlfriend even laid hands on me directly, saying, "You mute girl, do you dare to marry Felix?" Fine, I won't marry. But you two won't have a good time either. At my wedding, the rolling big screen suddenly played photos of my husband and his ex-girlfriend. Although the host noticed it quickly, all the guests saw it. I stood on the stage and looked at Bella sitting at the table. She was dressed in a white dress, just like a bride. I was so angry that I went straight over and slapped her. Felix saw this and pushed me hard, saying, "Vivian, she's just being immature. Do you really need to be so mad?" I almost fell over and couldn't believe looking at Felix. Bella covered her face where I slapped her, tears in her eyes. "Felix, I wish you happiness. I'll live on even without you." Tears ran down her face like cherry blossoms as Bella ran away sadly. Felix instinctively wanted to chase after her. "Felix," I called to him, my voice already breaking. The wedding had just begun, and he wanted to leave me in front of everyone? Felix paused briefly, realizing the situation at the moment, but hesitated for only a moment, turned back to me and said, "The wedding will be delayed for half an hour, I'll be back soon." I watched in shock as he walked away. My parents came over to comfort me, asking me to wait patiently. But I had a hunch that Felix wouldn't be back within half an hour. Indeed, an hour passed and he was still nowhere to be seen. I became the laughing stock. "Sorry everyone, today's wedding has been changed to a birthday party. It's my 25th birthday today. Welcome everyone to enjoy the cake. I'll return the gifts later. I hope you all have a pleasant time." I tried my best to save face for both families. After sending off the guests, Felix's mother left without saying a word. My parents were furious. I could only comfort them in turn. After sending them back to the hotel, I was completely exhausted and couldn't help but call Felix. It took 6 tries before he picked up the video call, and when the camera turned on, Bella was there. "Felix, you must come back soon. The wedding is surely a mess, and Bella will be angry," I said. She sneered, "She is really sucking up to you." My heart ached, not wanting to hear them talk anymore. I quickly ended the call. Half an hour later, Felix called back, but I didn't answer. That night, I slept with my parents in the hotel. After midnight, Felix called me countless times, but I just put the phone on silent. The next day, my parents looked at me with worry. I tried to smile at them. "Mom and Dad, you should go back first. I'll take care of myself." My mother felt sorry for me. "You've been dating him for 3 years, you even have the marriage certificate." Her tone was filled with dissatisfaction towards Felix. I hugged her. "Mom, I'm sorry about the wedding. I will divorce Felix." My parents, who lived overseas due to work, came back specifically for my wedding. Instead, they saw their daughter become a joke. They were both open-minded and saw how Felix hurt me, so they supported my decision. But they were afraid I would be sad and wanted to stay with me. It took some effort to persuade them to return. My parents love me dearly and there was no reason for me to show them my pain, letting them suffer with me. When we returned home from the airport, Felix was waiting for me. His hair was wet, wearing a suit, looking like he had just showered and changed clothes. "Bella, this is for you." He handed me a box containing a sapphire necklace. I silently looked at him. Many times before, when he made me angry, he would give me jewelry, like slapping me and then giving me a sweet. I used to like it and let him coax me. But everything changed since last night. "It's too valuable, I can't accept it," I said. Felix smiled dismissively. "We are already married. What's mine is yours, why can't you accept it?" I stared straight at him. He finally relented. "I'm sorry, my wife. I was wrong last night, you know, I've been with her for 6 years. She couldn't accept our marriage all of a sudden. I was afraid she couldn't handle it." "So what? You just abandoned me?" I questioned. Felix frowned impatiently. I've explained it to you. What else do you want? My heart dropped to the bottom of the valley. I need an apology. What? Yesterday's big screen. Bella must have set it up to embarrass me on purpose. I'm sure she provided the photos too. She hurt me, shouldn't she apologize to me? Felix looked unhappy. Vivian, don't be overdramatic. I told you, Bella just doesn't know any better. My heart shattered, hearing the sound of my heart breaking. There's some trouble in the company, so I can't go on a honeymoon with you today. Let's talk about it later. Felix straightened his suit and walked out of the door. I didn't even have a chance to talk to him about divorce. Felix was my senior in college. We met through a mutual introduction by the school leadership at an alumni exchange event 3 years ago, and he actively pursued me. At that time, I thought he was mature and considerate, so it was a natural progression for us to be together. Later, as I casually browsed through the school forum, I found out that Felix and Bella used to be a high-profile couple in school. They had been a couple since freshman year until their breakup 2 years after college graduation due to personality differences. 6 years was indeed a long time. But this couldn't be an excuse for Felix to leave in the midst of the wedding. As I came to my senses, I absent-mindedly called Bob, Felix's assistant. Is there something going on at the company? Bob seemed puzzled. No, Felix has arranged everything in advance to go on a honeymoon with you. Okay, I see. Thank you for your hard work. I packed my things and moved back to my own place. After sorting out my emotions, I went back to school to work on modeling projects. I turned off my phone during this time. When I finished work that evening, Felix appeared at my doorstep. As soon as we met, his face was full of impatience. Vivian, can you please stop making a scene? I looked at him calmly and suggested he should take the divorce certificate. Felix seemed to find it funny and asked if a foreigner or a disabled person like me could really have a better life without him. He noticed the cochlear implant behind my ear, which I used to hear since I lost my hearing due to fever when I was 6. Knowing my condition since we first met, Felix used to praise me for being brave and sunny, but now he was using my weakness against me, which deeply disappointed me. Despite my sincerity stating I wasn't throwing a temper tantrum, Felix remained confident, insisting I come back to him as if it was just a minor squabble, even promising to redo the wedding for me. His tone sounded condescending, as if I were climbing up to him from a lowly position. I told him the truth, and I was genuine, but he didn't believe me. Mocking my lifestyle choices, Felix asked if my clothes were bought from a supermarket, pointing out how I never wore branded clothes even during our 3-year relationship, or carried anything but canvas bags. He even mentioned my parents' simple outfits at the wedding, making assumptions based on my economic background and physical disability, implying that my desire for divorce was just a tantrum. It made me laugh at the absurdity of his words. Moving from China back to my home country at a young age, where people valued comfort over brand names, I never cared much for designer labels. As for bags, I genuinely favored practical canvas bags for their simplicity and eco-friendliness. I never thought Felix would elevate my life choices to represent my entire upbringing. It was almost laughable. Who says you have to be flashy just because you have money? I'll be at the office tomorrow at 9 waiting for you. We'll go to the civil affairs office together. We didn't see eye to eye on life perceptions, so I chose not to say more as I opened the door and entered my home. Just as Felix tried to follow me inside, I quickly slammed the door shut, accidentally hitting his nose. Felix yelled from outside, frustrated that I didn't seem to be reasonable, claiming he had given me a way out, yet I was still causing a scene. Leaning against the door, I listened calmly as his desperate words echoed outside. Just a month ago, we were planning our honeymoon destination, hovering over a map, and now things had taken such an ugly turn when my phone beeped. A phone friend request popped up from Bella. After accepting it, she immediately sent a message introducing herself and then bombarded me with 6 photos. The first 3 were from that day, showing Felix in the kitchen making noodles, while the other 3 were from our wedding day, with Felix wearing a suit and a flower crown, serving water to Bella by the bedside. It felt like seeing worms crawling. Fighting back my disgust, I replied, I've never seen someone so shameless to destroy someone's marriage. Bella sent a cute emoji in response, mentioning that Felix didn't blame me, claiming that I loved him so much and was so good at pleasing him. She asked if I really couldn't live without him. I curtly replied, "Our relationship is none of your business." Bella then triumphantly sent another message, boasting that she could call him with just one phone call. Right on cue, Felix's phone rang outside. He said something in a lowered voice, then stopped knocking on the door and quickly left. Stepping outside to check, all I saw was his car driving away. 15 minutes later, Bella sent a photo showing Felix getting out of his car and walking towards her. "You've been with him for 6 years, with lots of sweet memories. Do you really think you can hold on to his heart?" Following that, Vivian posted a moment on her social platform, saying, "After 6 years of separation, the heart still flutters." The image featured a sapphire necklace, the same one Felix had given me before, which I had left on the coffee table when I left. A wave of nausea hit me unexpectedly, leading me to block both Vivian and Felix on phone. The next day, I went to Felix's company to find him. The receptionist must have heard about the wedding incident. Her eyes filled with pity as she looked at me, but I remained unfazed. Calling Felix went unanswered, so I asked Bob to tell him I was waiting for him in the lobby. 2 hours later, Felix lazily made his way down. Upon seeing me, his impatience was evident as he commented, "Bella, being so dramatic will only make it worse for yourself." With a no-nonsense attitude, I told him, "Let's get a divorce. I don't want to talk more with you." Many employees passed by, overhearing my declaration. Perhaps feeling embarrassed, Felix agreed to the divorce. I had driven there, so I personally took him to the civil affairs office. The atmosphere in the car was tense, and I didn't spare him a glance throughout the journey. Eventually realizing my seriousness, Felix's tone softened as he pleaded, "Wife, I know I was wrong. Give me another chance, please." He reached for my hand, but I avoided his touch. With a pair of deep affectionate phoenix eyes, now looking crestfallen, he had been the center of my future for the past 3 years, yet he had managed to hurt me deeply. Intentionally avoiding his gaze, I ignored him. At a red light, his phone suddenly rang, and upon answering, I could hear Vivian's voice on the other end. His expression tightened as he subconsciously looked at me. At that moment, a car suddenly rear-ended us from behind. Thankfully, it was just a minor jolt. 2 burly men stepped out from the rear car, glaring at us as they approached. Felix got out of the car, and instead of handling the situation with the other driver, he told me, "Vivian slipped at home, I need to go check on her. You deal with the other driver, then drive back on your own." He tried to comfort me with a kiss, but I coldly turned my head away. He paused for a moment, gave me an annoyed look, and then hurriedly ran towards the bus that was about to leave at the roadside. In the scorching summer, my heart turned cold. The driver from behind, seeing that I was the only woman there, brazenly demanded 50,000 yuan from me right off the bat. Even though they were the ones who crashed into me and my car was perfectly fine, their car's headlights were damaged and the bumper was hanging loose. I was furious at their aggressive and unreasonable behavior, and insisted on calling the police. Suddenly, a bald man took a large wrench from under a car seat and unexpectedly swung it at me. I swiftly dodged backwards, only to be forcefully pushed down by another burly man who got off the same car. I fell to the ground unprepared, feeling a sharp pain in my abdomen, and a warm flow trickling down my leg. At the same time, the wrench struck my back. The intense dull pain mixed with the twisting pain in my abdomen made my consciousness blur. Seeing me laying on the ground bleeding, the responsible party, fearing the consequences, drove away in a panic. A kind-hearted passerby called 120 and reported the incident to the police. In the hospital, I was informed of a threatened miscarriage. The condition of the fetus was critical. If I wanted to keep the baby, I needed to be hospitalized immediately to protect the pregnancy. If not, I would have to undergo a surgery to ensure a swift recovery. Please arrange the surgery for me, doctor. On the 4th day of my hospitalization, I coincidentally met Bob. He mentioned that his mother needed a hysterectomy. That evening, Felix arrived disheveled and found me, and not just him, Vivian came too. "Bella," he came to my bedside with a guilty face, "I'm sorry. If it weren't for me leaving, we wouldn't have lost our child." I coldly chuckled, "Don't worry, even without this accident, I would have terminated the pregnancy. Felix's face changed color. Unable to bear it, Vivian intervened. Bella, you cannot speak without a hearing aid, you are disabled. How can you push away a man like Felix? I smirked, raising my eyebrows at Vivian. You can only rise if I divorce Felix. Now you're acting like nothing happened? Vivian's face turned pale and she fell silent. Felix composed himself and said, Bella, I brought Vivian here to apologize to you. He gestured to Vivian. Reluctantly, Vivian muttered, I'm sorry, it was my fault that ruined your wedding, it was all my fault. I watched with interest as they put on a show. Today, I learned that in the past few days, Felix took Vivian on a business trip and made her his chief secretary. Felix, I just want a dignified divorce with you. After all, you are the company's president. If I speak to the press about things I shouldn't say, it might tarnish your image as an entrepreneur. Felix was completely caught off guard by my words. A hint of disdain rose in his eyes. Fine, let's divorce. But don't come back begging me later. I gave a faint smile. I will never regret it. Early the next morning, I eagerly made an appointment with Felix to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. When we completed the procedures, I felt much lighter. Vivian came out of the car to greet the newly divorced Felix, and she seemed to radiate with joy. As we parted ways, Felix turned to me. How will you cope without me? Once I recovered, I threw myself into work. The mathematical modeling work for the dam designed by my supervisor was nearing completion. The government was about to put it out for bidding, and many bidding companies wanted to meet me and obtain the dam construction data. Bella, the one company wants to meet you. When are you available? The one company, founded by Felix. I had no idea they were also participating in the bidding process. To save time for both parties, I instructed my assistant Jack to inform all bidding companies to meet together, and no private meetings would be accepted. The meeting was held in the conference room of the school office building. When I arrived, all the leaders of the bidding companies were present. The scale of the dam this time was significant, with an estimated cost of around $4.5 billion. Companies bidding for these public service projects not only earned handsome profits but also gained a good reputation. So the attendees were all top executives. Bella, Vivian and Felix sat together in the front row. When they saw me, disdain flashed across their faces. This is not a place for you, Vivian said. Thinking I was there to cause trouble, Felix stood up, approached me, and warned, Bella, we are divorced now, don't mess up my business. I chuckled. Felix, 2 months apart, and you're still so arrogant. Felix stared at me warily. Jack came over. Felix, please take a seat first. Bella will explain everything. No private meetings will be accepted. Felix was puzzled. Jack introduced me to everyone. Hello everyone, this is my Ph.D. advisor Bella. She is the chief engineer in charge of the mathematical modeling for this dam project, and she will share the relevant data with you all. Felix and Vivian's expressions changed instantly. As they stared at me in shock, I walked to the podium and began to explain the data. When the meeting ended, Felix rushed over to me. You're the chief modeling engineer? How old are you? I calmly asked back. Felix, don't you know there's such a thing as a prodigy? My father is a renowned figure in the field of mathematics, and my mother has a great reputation in the construction industry. Influenced by them from a young age, I have had a passion for math. I skipped grades to obtain my Ph.D. After graduating in China, I followed my parents' advice to return to the country to work as a doctoral supervisor in a university, while taking on some mathematical modeling work. Perhaps my lifelong passion for mathematics made Felix my first love. With no experience in love, I failed to notice Felix's various neglects in our relationship. He never inquired about my family background, never cared about my work, and never involved me in his social circle. Looking back now, the sweetness was actually paired with indifference. Fortunately, I have nothing to do with him anymore. I turned and walked away. From behind, Vivian questioned, she must be faking it. Isn't she only 25? She's several years younger than us. Who is she trying to fool? To celebrate the successful completion of my work, the school leaders hosted a dinner party in the evening. Coincidentally, I ran into Felix. He was dressed sharply, escorting a group of elite people. When he saw the school leaders and came to our table to say hello, he looked surprised to see me there. The school leader who had introduced me to Felix before happened to be present as well. As Felix sat down at the table, the school leader started chatting. "Felix, I know Bella is a talented young lady. I introduced her to you with high hopes. You two have been dating for 3 years, and I was happy to see things working out. But I never expected you to be confused at the wedding. Do you know that she is actually a Ph.D. lecturer hired by the school at a high salary?" Felix looked bewildered. "She is so young, I always thought she was just an exchange student." The school leader frowned. "Who said she was an exchange student?" "She is a mathematical modeling expert, has developed multiple projects, holds several patents, which can support her for several lifetimes, and both her parents are renowned professors." Felix's face was full of disbelief. I, on the other hand, felt self-deprecating as Felix seemed to think I had shortcomings and must be academically mediocre due to my plain dressing style, assuming I was a poor exchange student. "Teacher, Felix and I are no longer together. Let's not talk about the past," I said. At the end of the gathering, Felix insisted on driving me home. Politely, I declined and hailed a taxi instead. However, upon reaching home, I found Felix had arrived before me and was standing at my doorstep. "Honey," he greeted me as if forgetting that we were divorced. I looked at him calmly, mocking him with a slight smile. "Felix, we are divorced." Felix tried to hold my hand, but I dodged it like avoiding germs. "Honey, I regret it. I can't seem to get over you in these 2 months. Can we get back together?" I found it amusing. When we divorced, he said I would regret it. But now, it seems he's the one regretting it. Whether his feelings were genuine or he had ulterior motives, I couldn't tell anymore, and I didn't care to find out. I had no intention of turning back. I firmly refused him. In the following days, Felix kept appearing in my life. When I was in the laboratory conducting experiments, he would wait outside with a bouquet of flowers. During my classes, he would sit like a docile student, gazing at me. He even showed up in front of my house in the morning with breakfast. I found his persistent presence annoying. When Felix showed up in front of me again, I confronted him directly. "I won't interfere in the bidding process. It's all up to the strength of the one company." Felix's expression faltered. "Bella, I truly regret it, and it has nothing to do with the bidding." After a brief silence, I looked up, my gaze calm but resolute. "But I don't love you anymore." Felix's eyes dimmed, and he didn't come to see me that day. However, that night, I received an unfamiliar call. Vivian was crying over the phone, asking me to pick up Felix from the bar and take him home. I found it strange and hung up directly. The next day, Vivian came to the school to find me. She pressured me, insinuating that I could easily influence the bidding process through my connections, and suggested that I should help Felix due to the love we once shared. Feeling helpless, I left as it was time for my class. Vivian, in a desperate move, warned me that I would regret not helping. I stopped in my tracks, turned back to look at Vivian, and seeing the resentment in her pretty face, I smiled. Since they were determined to make my life difficult, I decided to strike first. Before I entered the classroom, I posted the conversations Vivian sent me online, along with her and Felix's photos. By acting swiftly, I not only debunked the rumors she spread but also exposed her and Felix. With this incident, the chances of the one's participation in the bidding process seemed faint. Soon, the school was set to celebrate its anniversary. I followed Jack's advice and bought some nice clothes at the mall. On the day of the celebration, I wore a formal white evening dress and joined my fellow alumni for a joyous time. A figure approached me, and Felix's eyes settled deeply on me. "Bella, you look beautiful," he complimented me. I raised an eyebrow in response. I knew I wasn't bad-looking, just that I didn't put much thought into grooming or makeup. Felix's expression softened a bit as he explained that the rumors were spread by Vivian without his knowledge. I shrugged indifferently, saying, "Doesn't matter, I still got back at you guys." Vivian had posted on the school forum, claiming that I abandoned my fiancé of 3 years after achieving success, exploiting him and spending his money all along. In return, I exposed her involvement in ruining my wedding and Felix's affair. Jack also posted my achievements to prove that I was successful before meeting Felix and had millions in savings before. I had evidence, including photos of them staying in a hotel, with the dates coinciding with my hospitalization for a miscarriage. This move silenced the toxic duo. Felix looked regretful, asking if we could still go back. I pretended to be surprised, recalling how he claimed to be deeply in love with Vivian for 6 years. You regret it, Felix. Can you give me another chance? He is a young man with deep and powerful eyes, his bright features still retaining a touch of childishness. It's you. I was surprised. Bella. He shouted excitedly. The school leaders looked at each other and asked me, Bella, do you know David? I smiled at David. We actually met when we were in our teens. My parents thought the math progress in my current school was slow, so they sent me to a tutoring class in China during winter and summer vacations. We met at the tutoring class, and later met again at an international Olympiad math competition. After that, with my busy doctoral projects, I lost contact with him. David was much more excited to see me, coming forward to give me a tight hug. It's so great to see you. I was happy too. After all, this time the school leaders were not wrong. David was indeed a remarkable student. While we were chatting and having fun, Felix, who had been standing by, had a grim look on his face. But no one paid him any attention. Since I posted the incident with him and Vivian on the forum, his reputation took a nosedive. Even those teachers who had been proud of him before denied ever teaching him, including the school leaders. Felix seemed like he wanted to join our conversation, but all David and I talked about were math problems, so he couldn't get a word in. After a while, Vivian, all dolled up, came to find him, but he avoided her with a stern face. When the event ended, David was still not satisfied, asking for my phone and phone number repeatedly, worried. Bella, you won't suddenly lose contact with me this time, will you? I shook my head. I'm currently working at a university. I've signed a contract and won't leave for 5 years. Realizing his excessive enthusiasm, David smiled apologetically. We'll meet tomorrow then. Later on, I found out that David had applied to teach at a university and became my colleague. He even rented the house across from mine, becoming my neighbor. I'm not good at cooking, so naturally, he started cooking for me every day gradually. Apart from work, he was almost inseparable from me. Although I'm not stupid, I could sense his feelings. I had just gotten out of a previous relationship and didn't want to jump into a new one so soon. Luckily, David didn't mention it, just discussing math problems with me every day. I found this kind of life great. But Felix was still lingering around. The one corporation lost the qualification to participate in the bidding for the dam project, which hit Felix hard. I heard from colleagues that he spent a week drinking in a bar and even broke up with Vivian. I am a straightforward person. Since he's divorced, I don't care about his affairs, I just want to focus on my research. But beneath the calm surface, there was an undercurrent brewing. When the accident happened, I was walking out of the elevator as usual when a man in a gray jacket suddenly approached me with a long knife, and I instinctively dodged. I frantically dodged left and right in the narrow elevator. It's all because of you. It's all because of you. You took my place. I recognized him as one of the Ph.D. candidates hired with me. He studied at MIT and worked on mathematical modeling at a university. However, the school leaders said he lacked imagination and couldn't handle the modeling work. You idiot, go to hell. He swung the long knife towards me again, and this time, I was cut on the arm, blood gushing out instantly. I called for help, but there was no one around. As he swung the knife for the third time towards my head, a man in a suit rushed over and pushed him aside. Bella, run now. For a moment, I was stunned. The assailant's eyes were bloodshot, and he wrestled crazily with Felix. I saw the janitor appear at the elevator entrance, rushing out and grabbing her mop to strike the attacker. The attacker turned around in pain, glaring at me with a pair of bloodshot, murderous eyes as if he wanted to devour me. Felix held him tight, preventing him from breaking free to harm me just then. The chilling sound of the knife entering Felix's abdomen made my scalp tingle. Almost instantly, blood oozed from the corner of Felix's mouth. But he still looked at me with a smile on his face. My blood ran cold, almost forgetting the danger. Thankfully, the school security guards rushed in and stopped the attacker's madness. As we waited for the ambulance, I pressed on Felix's wound. "Felix, don't die, please." Felix weakly squeezed my hand, his eyes fixed on mine. "Bella, can you forgive me?" I calmly replied, "You can only earn my forgiveness by staying alive." Felix was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. The Ph.D. candidate was arrested by the police. When David arrived, I was standing in front of the operating room, covered in blood. "Your arm." I glanced at the arm wrapped in bandages, already disinfected and stitched up. "It's okay." David stared at me with concern in his eyes, his gaze fixed on the lit-up operating room worriedly. After a long 5 hours, the exhausted doctor came out. The patient's will to survive was still there. As long as the next 24-hour critical period was safely passed, everything would be fine. David and I both breathed a sigh of relief. Just as we were about to leave after arranging for a caregiver, Bob and Vivian rushed over. Upon seeing me, Vivian tried to come over and slap me but was stopped by David, grabbing her wrist. Vivian screamed in anger, "You witch, isn't Felix's suffering enough because of you? He risked his life for you, and you want to leave just like that? Nothing in this world comes that easy." I watched Vivian go crazy coldly and motioned for David to leave with me. David pushed Vivian away and quickly caught up with me on the way back. He hesitated to speak, so I knew what he wanted to ask. "Will I go back to Felix after he risked his life to save me?" I shook my head firmly, saying I wouldn't be so old-fashioned as to think I owed my life to Felix. There are many ways to repay kindness, and I won't choose one that makes me sick. Back home, David helped me wash since I couldn't move my arm, doing most of the washing himself. His face was red the whole time, making him quite cute. Enduring 24 hours was tough, but when we heard Felix had regained consciousness, David and I went to the hospital to see him together. Felix's face paled even more when he saw David and me together. I walked up to his bedside and told him that he shouldn't think of repaying the favor, or I would despise him. With that, I extinguished all of Felix's fantasies. This time, he saved me, which made up for all the harm he had caused me before, evening out our score. Hatred can be mentally draining, and I don't want to waste my energy on someone undeserving. The moment you can walk into the one on your own will be the moment I forgive you. Felix listened silently and didn't speak. After saying what needed to be said, I left with David. A fortnight later, when Felix was discharged, I personally went to pick him up. He was still living in the apartment he had prepared before, unchanged, with some of the figurines I had bought still displayed in their original places. And that sapphire necklace was still on the coffee table. Seeing my gaze fall on the necklace, Felix remembered something and explained that the necklace he gave Vivian was a replica, not the same as this one. I smiled calmly at him and suggested it was better to put the past behind us. Felix struggled to find words and sat down on the sofa, where my pink throw pillow still lay. I called a housekeeper for him, telling him to rest at home until he fully recovered. The housekeeper arrived, so I left. As I was about to leave, Felix called out, saying, "Bella, you know, right?" I looked at him calmly and said I knew the Ph.D. student who had just arrived at a university considered himself extraordinary. Feeling frustrated, and influenced by Vivian, he blamed everything on me, plotting to kill me with words and drugs. Felix nodded expressionlessly and apologized for underestimating how malicious Vivian could be, saying sorry. After a brief silence, in a pained tone, he admitted that the danger I faced was a result of his lingering attachment to Vivian, causing her to hate me so much. It was my dangerous liaison that brought us to this point. With that, he bowed his head. "I'm sorry, Bella." I glanced out the door and saw it was raining. David stood outside holding an umbrella, waiting for me in the pouring rain. I told Felix that David was waiting for me, bid him goodbye, and ran into the rain without looking back, determined. Shortly after I arrived home, Bob called to tell me that Felix had disobeyed doctor's orders and gone to the company. I chuckled, knowing he was a grown man who could take responsibility for his actions. Bob hung up without saying more. David brought me a cup of ginger tea, saying, "Drink this to prevent getting a cold." After sipping the tea, I showed David the invitation I had received to the Hodgkin's conjecture seminar and asked if he wanted to go. David chuckled and said, "I received an invitation too. We'll go together." While Felix was working hard for his company, David and I were exploring the world of mathematics. 2 years later, when my contract with the university ended, David nervously asked if I would stay for him. I nodded, agreeing to stay. David and I didn't have a dramatic love affair, everything was as smooth as water. He really suited me. The dark clouds of the past had finally dispersed, and no one would use my weaknesses to hurt me again. Felix is extra. When I first saw Bella, she seemed like an otherworldly fairy, with clean features and innocent eyes. Who wouldn't want to have a romantic relationship with such a pure girl? I started pursuing her passionately, feeling that she was experiencing love for the first time, showing all her joy on her face. She pursued a relationship with me, aiming for marriage. After we got married, I unknowingly became more unrestrained. It was at the wedding that I made a wrong choice. I thought her naive and gentle nature meant she would silently wait for me at home. When I returned and her attitude changed, I still didn't worry too much. I thought she would stay put at home obediently. I even thought her mention of divorce was just a tantrum. So when Vivian called, I left Bella alone to deal with the consequences. Vivian wasn't lying, she had slipped in the shower at home. When I found her, she was still lying there, unable to move, with bruised legs. I carried her to bed, and she tried to embrace me, but I pushed her away rationally. She looked at me with a wistful expression, asking, "Felix, do you not love me anymore?" I coldly replied, "I stopped loving you the moment you broke up with me." Vivian cried with sorrow. I come from a humble background. My father is a vegetable vendor, and my mother is just a regular housewife. I've achieved everything on my own through hard work. During the early days of my entrepreneurship, Vivian saw me struggling without any money, living in a basement, and eating plain buns with pickled vegetables. She couldn't handle 3 months of such life with me and decided to break up. At my lowest point, she left me. I heard from classmates that she only came to me after being dumped by her rich boyfriend. I was driven by vanity and wanted to show her how well I was doing now, not just in terms of my career, but also with my loving wife. I arrogantly took her on a business trip. That night, while I was drunk and asleep, she ended up in my bed. Something that should not have happened. Feeling anxious, I received a call from Bob, informing me that Bella had a miscarriage and was hospitalized. I learned about the ordeal she went through the day I left her. I saw her in the hospital, and her complexion was not good. I brought Vivian to apologize to her, but it seemed to backfire. I could feel Bella slipping away from me. After the divorce, the school leader told me about her excellence, making me realize my shallowness and arrogance all this time. Despite having a hearing impairment, she never felt inferior and lived brightly. On the other hand, I despicably tried to weaken her confidence, using this to make her dependent on me. The truth proved that I was the clown. I gave Vivian a sum of money to stop her from bothering me, but she was not willing to let go. Instead, she blamed Bella for my indifference and secretly incited a mentally unstable doctor to harm Bella. Fortunately, I saved her life. Bella said that the moment she forgave me would be when I recovered and stepped into the one again. The day she left the hospital, after she left, I rushed to the one at the fastest speed. "Bella, have you forgiven me?" When Vivian was sentenced, I went to see her for the last time. Bella was with David, and they were a perfect match. Vivian paused for a moment, then burst into uncontrollable laughter, saying, "Good, so good. If I can't be happy, neither can you." I looked at her coldly. "You are twisted. Spend the rest of your life in prison and face the consequences." Vivian's face twisted in anger, and she cursed me out. Later, I heard that Bella gave birth to a daughter who looked like David. I thought, she's probably another academic genius.